Hello guys and welcome back. If you are new around here, I cover mostly Australian cases and today we are covering another solved case and I think I'm going to put my candle out. Can you guys see that black smoke? It also smells really strange. And now that's sorted. Before we get into it, I want to thank today's sponsor for working with me again, and that is Skillshare. And if you are unfamiliar with Skillshare, it's an online learning community that offers thousands of different classes where you can obtain new skills, find a new interest, or learn something creative. Their classes range from cooking, photography, marketing, gardening, organization. Pretty much if you can think of it, Skillshare probably have a class on it. Recently I decided to do a class that involved learning some new skills and being creative, called the Writer's Toolkit, 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit, a class run by best-selling author Simon Van Bowie. So with making the videos that I do, writing is something I do every day. But sometimes after I've finished my research, actually sitting down and concentrating on writing out a cohesive story, I guess, is not always the easiest for me. And Simon's lessons really go into how to get yourself in that right headspace and create a routine to keep you writing and keep you motivated. And something I really appreciate about Skillshare classes is that they're broken down into lessons. So for example, Simon's class was 38 minutes broken down into 9 lessons, making learning for me very easy and very digestible. So the first 1,000 people to use the link in the description below will get a free trial to Skillshare's premium membership, and after that, it's only around $10 a month. And having said all of that, let's get into today's case. So we're heading back to the year of 1999. On November 16, Zahra Claire Baker was born in the regional city of Wagga Wagga in New South Wales, Australia, to parents Emily Dietrich and Adam Baker. Emily and Adam had briefly been engaged, but from what I could tell, it was not a planned pregnancy, and the couple did not end up staying together. Weeks after Zara was born, Emily, who was just 19 years old at the time, gave full custody of Zara to Adam, who was in his early 20s, by the way, as Emily had been suffering from postpartum depression. Shortly after Adam obtained custody, himself and Zara picked up and moved to Newcastle, still in New South Wales, and there he lived with his parents. Emily saw Zara occasionally over the following months, seeing her last when she was 8 months old, and this would actually be the last time that Emily ever got to see her daughter before Adam decided to cut her out of their lives. And as to why he made this decision, I really couldn't tell you. In 2004, Adam, Zara, Adam's parents, plus one of Adam's brothers, moved to the small town of Gairu in Queensland, as Adam and some of his family had got jobs at the town's sugar mill. And in fact, the town of Gairu, which has a population of just a few hundred people, pretty much is just a town of sugarcane farms and the sugar mill, and not too much else from what I could tell. Besides the obvious necessities of a small town, supermarket, schools, post office, etc. If you are from Gairu though, comment down below. I would be super excited if somebody from Gairu, I hope I've pronounced that correctly. I did look it up. But if you are from Gairu, let me know. So in Gairu, Adam's mother, Karen Baker, helped out single father Adam by looking after her granddaughter when Adam was at work. Zara, who had grown up to be this adorable, brown-haired, blue-eyed little girl with a smattering of freckles across her face, was absolutely adored by her grandmother. The following year, in 2005, when Zara was just 5 years old, turning 6, the Bakers received some tragic news. Zara had been diagnosed with bone cancer. As a result of this cancer, the lower part of her leg had to be amputated and she was fitted with a prosthetic leg. But the ever bright and optimistic Zara didn't let this get her down, calling her prosthetic leg her Barbie leg, which I think is just such it's a great story, and it's a testament to just how resilient and positive young children can be. And after recovering and overcoming so many hurdles, Zara and her family soon received another blow. The cancer had returned. As a result of this second round of cancer treatments, Zara lost most of her hearing permanently and was fitted for hearing aids. So in Zara's few short years here on Earth, she had already faced so many battles, more than some adults face in a lifetime. But being the little trooper that she was, she overcame each and every one of them and remained bubbly and positive throughout. And honestly, it sounds like she handled everything in her life better than I think most adults would be able to. She handled everything with dignity and with grace. And by 2008, Zara was in remission. So I do want to put a quick warning in here now. This video is a case involving a violent crime against a child. So if you are sensitive to this topic, now might be the time to switch off. And of course, as always, I won't be going into any extreme detail, but enough where you can put together what happened. Okay, so changing gears for a moment. During the time period of Zara's health battles, so 2006 to 2008-ish, Adam used a website called IMVU that may or may not stand for Instant Messaging Virtual Universe. I really couldn't get a clear answer on that. But anyway, the website, basically from what I could tell, is a virtual reality / dating site / social networking site founded in the early 2000s, kind of similar to Second Life, I imagine, if that's even still a thing. I wouldn't have a clue. Let me know down below if people are still using Second Life. I would be very curious. Or if anyone even knows what Second Life is anymore. I'm pretty sure that's been around for a long time. And honestly, I didn't really know what IMVU was before making this video. But the more you know, I guess. So anyway, Adam was doing, whatever people do on these websites when he meets a woman with the username Gothic Fairy, aka Elisa from North Carolina in the USA. So on IMVU, you create a character or an avatar, I guess. Elisa's was this fairy with red angel wings, and Adam's was this black figure with bat wings. And by the way, I'm not judging Adam or anyone that uses this website or similar. I literally know nothing about them, and my guess is people like Adam use them as a form of escapism. He was a single dad and his only child was very sick. I get why he'd want to go onto a site like IMVU to meet people and escape his everyday life. After all, that's the reason I go onto YouTube and I watch people's vlogs of them doing literally nothing with their everyday life. It's just my form of escapism. So when Adam meets Gothic Fairy, aka Elisa, on this website, they hit it off pretty much straight away, and a relationship soon forms between the pair. Over time, the relationship gets pretty serious, so much so that Elisa, full name Elisa Fairchild, who was 40 years old, decides to go visit Adam and his family all the way over in Gairu, Australia. At this time, by the way, Adam is 31 years old, so 9 years Elisa's junior, or thereabout. After meeting in real life in 2008, the pair fall so much in love that they decide to get married as soon as possible and move to the US together to start their wonderful new life. There is only one teeny tiny little problem with this scenario, and that is Elisa is already married. But we'll get back to that conundrum in just one moment. So of course, poor Adam is none the wiser that Elisa is still legally married to a man back in the States, and in July of 2008, the couple get married at Adam's parents' house in Gairu. It's also worth noting that Adam's friends and family were really not a fan of Elisa, and this was before they knew about the other husband. And this dislike of Adam's new wife pretty much came from the fact that she was a compulsive liar. I feel like we have all known someone in our life like this. Someone that tells you stories or facts about themselves that are so extravagant and ridiculous and impossible. And they tell these stories all the time, despite having this seemingly normal life, that you know they are full of complete BS. Well, that was Elisa. She told people she was a cancer survivor, an ex-police officer that had been shot in the line of duty, and that she had also been a bounty hunter. Not to say all of these scenarios couldn't happen to one person, but in this case, they were all lies. And it was quite obvious to people that she would tell these stories to that she was lying. So as you can imagine, there was just a few reservations from friends and family about Elisa and Adam's relationship. But their number one concern in this entire situation was Zara. So if you're not from Australia, you may not be aware that healthcare over here is free. And with all the health issues that Zara had dealt with in the past, free healthcare was pretty imperative for her. And of course, I said a moment ago that Elisa and Adam were planning to move to the US together to start their new life. And this, of course, included Zara. But with the healthcare system the way it was and currently is in the US, if she were to get sick again, God knows how much it would cost to get her the proper care that she needed. When Adam's family brought this point up with the couple, Elisa assured the Bakers that she had plenty of money, and if anything were to happen to Zara health-wise, that she had more than enough money to take care of it. Now, you may or may not be shocked to hear that this was another lie. But regardless, and against the better judgment of some of Adam's family, off Elisa, Adam and Zara went towards the end of 2008 to start their new life in the USA. So before we continue on to their life in the US, I want to tell you a little bit more about Elisa Fairchild and where she came from. As I said, Elisa was still legally married to another man when she married Adam, although they were not still in a relationship, not that makes it any better. And on top of that, Elisa forgot to mention to Adam that she had actually been married 6 times previous to him, including the one that she was still married to, making Adam lucky husband number 7. So Elisa had a bit of a track record. 3 of her previous husbands she had married all within a 3-year period, and actually it seems like she had made a bit of a habit out of marrying a man before she had divorced the previous one. One article I read said that she was married to 3 men at one point, which would not surprise me at all. And most of these marriages ended with the man leaving the relationship, the result of them being fed up with the lies, the physical and mental abuse, and the general BS. By the time Elisa had turned 25 years old, she had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, all from 3 fathers and 2 marriages. And I'm not saying this in a judgmental way at all, by the way. I'm just stating the facts of Elisa's life. And her relationship with her children was not exactly great. In fact, it was pretty bad. She treated her children like shit. She was abusive and neglectful, and in turn, her children really didn't like her very much at all. So the man Elisa was married to before Adam, his name was Aaron Young. But the weird thing about this situation, not only did the pair keep in touch, which isn't the weird part, but when Elisa introduced Adam to Aaron, she introduced her former husband as her brother. If that doesn't scream I'm hiding something, I don't know what does. And Elisa's general life was erratic and somewhat nomadic. She lived at about 42 addresses in 7 years, getting kicked out of a number of these for one reason or another. And she also had a criminal record, 7 convictions for passing fake checks. Plus, she was in a lot of debt, not rolling in money like she had made out to the Bakers. So back to their life in the US, the Bakers initially moved in with Elisa's father in a small city called Hickory, located in Catawba. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but as we all know by now, my pronunciation is rubbish. Catawba County, North Carolina. And of course, both Adam and Zara were not legal residents of the US at this time. I think through marriage, Adam could have applied for some sort of a residency or visa, but he never did. And after about 6 months of living in Hickory, Elisa's father kicked them out, apparently due to Elisa's drug taking. So the trio moved on to a flat in Granite Falls, which is an old steel town just northwest of Hickory in the Caldwell County. By the way, let me know if you are from North Carolina, because I found understanding the geography of a lot of these places very confusing. There was counties and little cities and towns, and I got very confused. I tried to understand it, so I just sort of divided the places up into counties, and I hope everything makes sense throughout the video, but say hey if you're from North Carolina. So those that lived in the neighbouring flats to the Bakers in Granite Falls were witness to the explosive arguments between the married couple, both verbal and physical. Elisa and Adam were also always constantly behind in their rent, a pattern that will continue at their future addresses. So again, after 6 months, their landlady, Shirley Mims, asked them to leave, which they did without causing any issues. And Shirley also happened to live right next door to the Bakers and had witnessed the terrible arguments that occurred. But when Elisa and Adam moved out, she was shocked to learn that the couple had a young daughter. In the 6 months that they had lived there, she had not once seen Zara come or go from the flat or play in the neighbourhood. She'd seen Elisa and Adam come and go almost daily from the flat, but they were never accompanied by a little girl. And Shirley had actually seen Zara when the Bakers initially moved in, but she never saw her again after that and assumed that she was just a relative. Another thing Shirley noticed when the Bakers moved out was the strange noises coming from their attic had stopped. They had not been there before they moved in, and now they had disappeared again. So she sent her husband into the attic to investigate. In the attic, her husband found some boards that had been moved around and a bedsheet. Shirley was horrified to realise that Elisa and Adam may have been keeping Zara in the attic, or at least making her sleep up there for the last 6 months. This was never proven, mind you, but it sure as heck looked pretty bad. So let's backtrack for a moment to talk about Zara's schooling, since I haven't yet mentioned it. The timeline is about to skip around a little bit, so hopefully this all makes sense. When the Bakers first moved to the US, Zara was enrolled in Hudson Elementary before being transferred to Granite Falls Elementary. But it wasn't too long before she was pulled out of school altogether. Mind you, her attendance record had been pretty shocking, to no fault of Zara's, so it's not like being pulled out of school had much effect on her day-to-day routine. And the reason Zara was taken out of school was because of the amount of complaints and the concern for Zara's welfare from her teachers. In fact, her teachers had even started keeping a record detailing abuse that they thought Zara might be enduring at home. You see, Zara would often turn up to school with bruises, one time even a black eye. And on one occasion, despite her age, Zara urinated on herself at school, which I'm assuming teachers saw as a sign of a very stressed out little girl. When teachers questioned Elisa about the bruises on Zara, she said it was because her prosthetic leg made her clumsy and she was always falling over, which I think is a disgusting thing to say. The concern for Zara's welfare grew to the point that one of her teachers gave Zara her personal phone number, telling her to call her anytime, and two teachers even paid a personal visit to the Baker's residence. Of course, Elisa and Adam viewed this concern from teachers as them overstepping the line and claimed that this was the reason that Zara was now going to be homeschooled. Now, when you decide to homeschool a child, you can't just decide to do it and teach them whatever you want. You need to register your intent to do so with some sort of Department of Education so they can monitor your child's progress, help you along, make sure you're doing the right thing, all of that. But because the Bakers had moved around so frequently during their time in the US, it seemed like Zara simply fell through the cracks of the system, and no one noticed that a little girl was not enrolled in school and was not being properly homeschooled. And by all accounts, Zara really was never properly homeschooled. So jumping around in the timeline a bit, back to when the Bakers were evicted from their Granite Falls flat. After this, they moved to a trailer park in the town of Hudson, which is just northwest of Granite Falls, still in the Caldwell County. At the trailer park, the fighting not only continued between Elisa and Adam, but other residents of the trailer park witnessed the horrific way in which Zara was being treated by her stepmother. Elisa was often seen yelling abuse at Zara as she made her walk up and down a hill in the trailer park, shouting things like, "You think you're so good. I think you should get that limp out of your leg, walk faster." And if this was the way that Elisa treated Zara where people could witness it, it was terrifying to think that what was happening behind closed doors. One resident of the trailer park, Tanya Hefner, one day decided that she had had enough of witnessing abuse against a little girl and decided it was time to confront Elisa. But unsurprisingly, Elisa responded by threatening Tanya. So Tanya promptly reported the incident to the police, letting them know that not only had she been threatened, but she had been witnessing frequent abuse of a little girl from her stepmom. The Department of Social Services did end up paying the Bakers a visit and interviewing all three family members separately. But unfortunately, I think by this point, Zara was too scared to say anything, Adam was just too ignorant, and Elisa was a master manipulator. The Department of Social Services would end up visiting the Bakers 4 times during their time living in the US, following up on reports from a number of people that had either witnessed Zara being abused or suspected it, including her teachers.
Soon, former neighbors began to talk.
I think there was more behind closed doors than what anybody knew.
Do you think she was being abused?
Oh, yeah.
In what way?
There was one incident where Zara's stepmother was whooping Zara, and she broke her hand on her prosthetic leg.
She'd come out and yell and scream at her and tell her she's going to whip her if she didn't start walking and learning to run. And
each visit resulted in nothing being done and nothing being followed up on. And on August 6, 2010, the Department of Social Services closed Zahra Baker's case, having found no evidence of child abuse. And this would later prove to be a tragic mistake. The last place the Bakers lived as a family was a house on 21st Avenue Northwest in Hickory, so back to where they started. And like their neighbours back in Granite Falls, most of the neighbours were not even aware that Elisa and Adam had a 10-year-old daughter. At this point, Zara was allegedly being homeschooled, so she didn't need to leave her house for that reason, but it appeared that her parents never took her out the house for anything else anyway, or even let her play in the neighbourhood. At this time was also when Adam was working for a small tree maintenance business called Real Tree Services, owned by a man named Mark Coffey, who also happened to be Elisa and Adam's landlord. Because Adam was illegally working in the US, he required a job that paid cash in hand, and that's exactly what Mark Coffey did. He paid Adam cash in hand while subtracting his rent out of each pay, meaning for once the couple were actually keeping up with their rent. And as far as Elisa working, from what I could tell, she was pretty much drug dealing, something Adam apparently was oblivious to, and a crime she would eventually get caught for and punished for. And of course, she was drug dealing from her home, putting Zara in danger as well. But at this point, are we even surprised by this? Not really. So now we're skipping ahead to Saturday, October 9 at around 5:20 in the morning. Elisa is on the phone to 911 telling the operator that she woke up to see the wood and mulch piles in her backyard, which were to do with Adam's work, on fire. The fire department are of course immediately sent over to put it out, and it was a relatively small fire, and this was later determined to be an act of arson. And as well as the fire department, a police officer was sent to attend the scene because, it was a fire in the middle of the night or the morning. I'm sure he was just there to make sure everything was okay. And while he was taking a look around to see if there was anything suspect or suspicious, he found something fairly unusual and disturbing. The passenger side door of Adam's work vehicle, which was a 1996 Chevy Tahoe SUV, was open, with the smell of gasoline coming from inside, possibly indicating that someone had planned to set the vehicle on fire as well. However, that wasn't the strangest thing about the situation. A handwritten ransom note was found on the windscreen of the vehicle, addressed to Adam's boss, Mark Coffey, also the owner of the house. The note read, "Mr. Coffey, you like being in control. Now who is in control? We have your daughter." That was with no full stops or commas or any grammar, by the way, which is why I said it so awkwardly. And the note also asked for a $1 million ransom and signed off with the words, "No cops." Now I'm thinking that someone that owns a tree maintenance business probably doesn't have $1 million, but who knows? So of course the police contact Mr. Coffey to ask him if his daughter was missing, to which he responds, no, she isn't. Now you'd think at this point, or very soon after, Elisa or Adam would check on Zara, seeing as the note implied a girl had been kidnapped, and there was also a strange fire in their backyard. But no. Are we surprised? And the only reason that police did not insist on the Bakers checking on their daughter was because, like the neighbours, they had no idea that Zara even existed. Later that same day, after the backyard fire, Adam finally decides that he should probably check on his daughter. He checks her room, she's not there. Checks her house, she's not there, and she's nowhere else that he can think of. 10-year-old Zahra Baker is nowhere to be seen. So at around 2 p.m, he calls the police to report his daughter missing, starting off the call in a very casual, nonchalant tone, saying, yeah, my daughter is missing. He also adds, my daughter is, I think, coming into puberty, because she's hitting that brooding stage, so we only see her when she comes out and when she wants something, and that's about it. And Adam actually lets out a laugh when he says this, even though his daughter is, missing. I don't even know why he said the brooding teen comment unless he was trying to justify the fact that he had only just noticed his 10-year-old child was missing at 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. Now, I'm not saying that there's a right way and a wrong way to act when your child goes missing, but his phone call was a little odd, to say the least. And complete side note here, Zara's biological mother, Emily Dietrich, had just days earlier managed to track down where Zara was living after spending years trying to find her. Emily actually figured out where she was when a friend who had connections with North Carolina sent her a photo of Zara at school holding up a school certificate. When Emily examined the certificate and looked up the school, she realized that her daughter was now living in the US. Up until this point, she didn't even know that she had left Australia. And to be honest, I think it's pretty gross, the fact that Adam cut Emily out of Zara's life just because she had been struggling with postpartum depression, which is incredibly common for women to struggle with after giving birth. And let's not forget, Emily was just 19. Did Adam even try to help her through it? Did she have any sort of support system for that matter? And if there was another reason why Adam decided to cut Emily out of Zara's life, I couldn't find it. After all, no one chooses to be depressed. So why was Emily being punished? But anyway, a statewide Amber Alert was sent out that evening for Zahra Baker, and police also brought in Elisa and Adam to be interviewed so they could provide some more details and be eliminated as suspects, which is, of course, standard procedure. Adam told police he suspected the person who had written the ransom note may have mistaken Zara for Mark Coffey's daughter, and that maybe the fire had been some sort of distraction so they could take Zara without anybody noticing. And Elisa told police that the last time she checked on her stepdaughter was at 2:20 a.m. and she was fast asleep. After that, she had no idea what could have happened. Elisa also claimed the reason she didn't check on Zara after the fire was because Zara was hearing impaired and the commotion wouldn't have made her stir anyway, and she didn't want to disturb her sleep. So the first place investigators looked for clues was, of course, the Bakers' home. There they find no signs of forced entry, and there's no sign that Zara may have run away. And she had no history of running away either. Mind you, she did have every reason to want to. Not that police were aware of this at that point. Investigators also discovered that her prosthetic leg was missing, but her hearing aids had been left behind. Now, why would a kidnapper take Zara's prosthetic leg? After all, without it, there was little chance of Zara escaping from this supposed kidnapper. And if she had run away, surely she would take her hearing aids. The following morning, October 10, Elisa is arrested, but it's not in relation to Zara's disappearance. She's being charged with writing fake checks, larceny, communicating threats, and driving without a license. So, as Elisa sits in jail, the search for Zara gets well underway. Investigators continue to thoroughly look through the Bakers' home, taking search and rescue dogs with them to see if there's any trace of Zara that can be found. When the dogs reach both the Bakers' vehicles, Adam's Chevy Tahoe and their shared 1999 Toyota Camry, the dogs alert to the presence of human remains. And of course, both vehicles are immediately impounded. Police continue their search in the neighbourhood, nearby buildings, and they hand out photos of Zara to neighbours. And this is when they are shocked to learn that most of the neighbours didn't even know that a 10-year-old girl was living with Elisa and Adam. From what I could gather, it seemed like pretty early on in the investigation, police had their doubts about any abduction, despite the ransom note, and they suspected that something more sinister may have taken place. On October 11, Adam appears on Good Morning America pleading with the public for any information on his missing daughter. The next day, on October 12, the Amber Alert for Zahra Baker is cancelled after Elisa admits to police that she is the one that wrote the ransom note. She also asks for an attorney, making her look pretty damn suspect. For writing the fake note, Elisa is charged with obstruction of justice, just to add to her pile of charges, and Zara's missing person investigation is changed to a homicide investigation, meaning the search for Zara is now a search for her remains. But the one major problem investigators were having was pinpointing exactly when Zara had last been seen by someone other than Elisa. Because she didn't attend school and clearly never left the house, she was rarely seen by anyone, and it made it very difficult to be able to start the search in the right places.
Are you basically saying you don't know where to look?
What we're saying is we don't have a time frame to put this girl in that house.
Adam eventually did admit that he had not seen his daughter in about 15 days. He said he worked a lot and his days were long, so by the time he got home, Zara would be fast asleep, although he said he would always pop his head into her room to say goodnight, even if she was sleeping, and as far as he could see, she was always there tucked into bed. He also added that this wasn't unusual for him to not see his daughter for prolonged periods of time, and that Elisa had always been her primary carer since he had been in the States. Eventually, workers at a furniture store came forward saying that Zara and Elisa had been in their shop on September 22, meaning that Zara had at least been alive up until that point. So skipping ahead just a little bit to October 25, Adam is arrested, and like Elisa's initial arrest, the charges have nothing to do with Zara. His charges include 5 counts of writing worthless checks, 3 counts of failing to appear in court, 2 counts of communicating a threat, and failure to return a rental property, all crimes he had committed since being with Elisa. So he ended up joining Elisa at the same jail she was being held at, but he was soon out on bail as his bond was much, much lower than Elisa's was. About 2 days after Adam's arrest, a prosthetic leg was found in bushland just off Christine Road in the Caldwell County. Of course, investigators were pretty certain that it was Zahra Baker's, but to be sure, they compared the serial number on the prosthetic leg with Zara's medical records back in Australia, and it was found to be a match. At this point, Elisa Baker was given an option. If she cooperated with the investigation and told them where Zara was, the death penalty would be taken off the table. If she didn't cooperate and was found guilty, she'd likely be sentenced to death. So Elisa agreed to cooperate and began to tell her version of events. So let's go over what Elisa said happened. Elisa said Zara had been feeling unwell in early September and had continued to get more sick over the next several weeks, until on September 24 she walked into Zara's bedroom and finds her not breathing. And don't ask me why she didn't take her to the doctors during this time like a normal parent if she was sick, but as it turned out, despite Zara's medical history, she had only been to the doctor about 2 or 3 times since moving to the States. So when Elisa sees Zara is not breathing, she starts CPR, continuing for about 30 minutes before giving up. At this point, instead of calling 911 like any sane person would have done if they found a child not breathing, she calls Adam to come home. And when Adam gets home, she tells him what happened, and his response was apparently to tell her to calm down, go take her medication, and that he would take care of everything. Elisa said they decided it would be best to not report Zara's death because Adam was still in the US illegally. And then what happened next? She says she did not witness or have any involvement in. Elisa alleges she saw Adam take Zara's body into their bathroom, shut the door, and apparently run the water on full blast to drown out what was occurring. And at this point, she says she thought Adam had likely become overcome with grief, or maybe he was performing some kind of Aboriginal ritual since he was from Australia and she didn't know anything about his homeland, which is incredibly offensive. What the hell does she think we're doing down here in Australia, for God's sake? Elisa then said herself and Adam disposed of Zara's remains the following day, and at this point police of course ask Elisa where these remains are, and she tells them to look near Dudley Shoals Road in the Caldwell County. So that's where the investigation goes next, and what they find there is truly horrifying. Scattered across this area were some of the dismembered remains of Zahra Baker. Over the next several weeks and months, her remains would be found across 3 counties: the Catawba, Burke, and Caldwell counties, all in North Carolina. But as the remains had been scattered so far and wide, and due to the area in which they were placed, it was possible that wildlife had got to some of them first before the investigators, or had at least moved them far away. And due to the condition that the remains were found in, and the fact her skull was not initially found, Zara's death was ruled as undetermined violent homicide. The only thing that could be determined from the remains was that Zara had been dismembered with 2 separate cutting tools. Investigators also found 18 pinhole-sized specks of blood on a wall in Zara's bedroom above her bedhead, which would later bring them to conclude that Zara had likely died of blunt force trauma while laying in bed. So of course, police had to somehow back up Elisa's version of events that claimed that Adam was part of all of it. So they decided to check cell phone tower records to see exactly where Elisa and Adam were on September 25, the day they apparently disposed of the remains. Elisa's phone was found to be in the area where the remains were discovered, but Adam's phone was 20 miles or 32 kilometres away at his workplace. And on top of that, phone records showed that Elisa had been trying to call Adam that day. Now, why would you be calling someone that was apparently with you all day? So at this point, you might be thinking, what the heck does Adam have to say about his wife's confession? Well, first off, before he even heard about her confession, he became aware of a few other things involving Elisa. Police told Adam that she was still illegally married to a man named Aaron Young, the guy that Adam thought was Elisa's brother. Oh, and that he was Elisa's 7th husband. After those revelations, he felt slightly less inclined to side with his wife on anything to do with the investigation. And then of course he finds out that she's also claiming that he dismembered his own daughter, which he does deny having any involvement in whatsoever. Adam said that Elisa put the idea in his head that the ransom note was connected to Zara's disappearance, and that Elisa had also told him not to say anything to police, given that he was in the country or working in the country illegally. But he says he did truly believe Zara had been alive and well up until the day he reported her missing.
Do you think that your wife was anyway involved in your daughter's disappearance?
I'm not sure. I'd like to think no, because that's my wife. Until they've completed their investigation and tell me some more, I can't honestly say.
Unsurprisingly, the police didn't believe Elisa's version of events, at least as far as Zara being dead when she found her and Adam's involvement. And in February of 2011, she was charged with second-degree murder, only avoiding a first-degree murder charge because she had cooperated with the police And basically, their conclusion was if she didn't tell them where Zara was, they may have never found her. So, what police think actually happened is that on September 24, as Zara lay in bed, Elisa hit her over the head with an unknown object until she passed away. It's then believed that Elisa dismembered Zara's remains in their bathtub, and traces of bleach were later found in the bathtub to back up this theory. And the reason investigators think Elisa decided to dismember the remains was because it would make it easier for her to transport and conceal them, and it would also hide the cause of death. They think Elisa then loaded the remains into one of the family's vehicles, and on September 25, Elisa drove around and disposed of the remains on her own. Tragically, the day that Zara was thought to be killed, September 24, was just 6 weeks after the Department of Social Services closed their case regarding Zara's welfare, determining that she had not been in any danger. And you probably won't be surprised to hear that Elisa was also charged with bigamy, aka being married to more than one person at a time. Certainly didn't see that coming, did we? Police believe Adam was not involved, or at least they couldn't prove that he was, and none of the evidence really suggested that he was. However, he wasn't exactly in the clear. In April of 2011, Adam was charged with identity theft and obtaining property under false pretenses, amongst other charges, and was given an electronic monitoring device to wear, told he was not to leave North Carolina until his legal situation was sorted. In September of 2011, Elisa Baker, who was now 43 years old, pled guilty to the murder of her stepdaughter, plus a bunch of other lesser crimes, even though today she still insists that she did not kill or dismember Zara. And I actually watched an infuriating 60 Minutes interview with Elisa in jail. I'll link it down below, or I'll put it in my resources. But honestly, I don't think I've seen someone tell so much BS in one interview in my entire life. Anyway, Elisa was sentenced to 15 to 18 years in prison, and this incredibly light sentence absolutely outraged people. Both local what are local North Carolina people called? North Carolinians? I'm so sorry if you're from North Carolina. I don't know what local North Carolina people are called, but local North Carolina people, the US and Australians, were outraged by this ridiculously light sentence. As if killing someone isn't bad enough, as if killing a child isn't bad enough, she killed a child that was more vulnerable than most. And the public was sickened by it. Unsurprisingly, in prison, she has to be kept in isolation pretty much 24 hours a day because, as we all know, even other criminals hate child killers. And by the way, not one of her charges was actually relating to child abuse. So in 2012, Zara's skull was found, meaning that they had found the majority of her remains by this point. In 2013, Elisa pled guilty to some drug charges, a result of selling prescription painkillers from her home that Adam says he had no knowledge of. And for this, she was sentenced to a further 10 years with no possibility of parole. So this sentence will start after her murder sentence ends. Adam Baker eventually returned to Wagga Wagga in Australia, with none of his charges being serious enough for him to serve any jail time in the States, and he took Zara's remains home with him. He continues to maintain that he had nothing to do with Zara's death and that he is completely innocent, but you can't deny what Adam is absolutely guilty of, is being an absent father and being ignorant to what his daughter was going through and really not paying any attention to Zara and her life. But Adam isn't the only person to be blamed in this situation, with so many people that suspected Zara was being abused and yet not enough was ever done. The entire system failed this little girl in every way possible. And in my opinion, what happened to Zahra Baker was entirely avoidable. In late 2011, Zara's law was introduced to North Carolina, which makes the dismemberment and disposal of human remains in order to conceal a crime a Class 1 felony, allowing prosecutors to seek harsher penalties against offenders. At the time Zara was killed, North Carolina didn't have a harsh punishment in place for offenders that dismembered human remains, hence why Elisa's sentence was so light. Zara also has a memorial in Caldwell County and a playground named after her in Hickory. And last month would have been Zahra Baker's 21st birthday. I do want to thank you so much for being here and listening to Zahra Baker's story. It is always incredibly hard getting through cases involving a child. And I want to say thank you to my channel members, my shining stars. Thank you so much. Until next time, stay vigilant and stay safe. And I will see you all very soon. Bye, guys.